This is Bill McCarthy, General President of the Teamsters Union. The replacement worker legislation that will come before Congress in 1991. It's our most important priority at the Teamsters Union. We are going to commit all our resources to guarantee that the union members get fairness and justice in the workplace.
Strike one, you're out.
They tell us we have the right to strike, but they have the right to replace us, so actually we have no right to strike. And they don't have any initiative to negotiate a contract because they have replacement workers to replace you, and if you go on strike, they replace you.
You know, it'll never happen in good old United States. Our government would never let them come in and take your job when you have a labor dispute. We were wrong.
If they can fire us for striking, they can do anything they want to.
Taking away those rights is like turning back the clock. That's not what America's all about.
I would have to say that without that right, you're just close to getting right back to slavery.
Their names were Carnegie, Pullman, Gould. The same Jay Gould who boasted he could hire one half of the working class to kill the other half, and tried to do it. In the late 19th century, these robber barons reaped enormous profits from a booming industrial landscape built by working Americans. But American workers had no such power and wealth. They did have long hours, low wages, unsafe working conditions, and an absolute lack of dignity. The labor movement made gains, but workers were struggling against a stacked deck, stacked with the full power of the state, the courts, and violent private armies. It all changed in 1935. Then, as part of an effort to end the Great Depression, the National Labor Relations Act was signed into law, guaranteeing workers the right to organize and engage in collective bargaining, including the right to strike when necessary. The resulting balance between labor and management produced negotiated benefits that were extended to all Americans, including health insurance, pensions, safe and healthy workplaces, and much more. When bargaining fails to produce a result the workers can live with, the strike puts both sides under pressure to reach a settlement. Workers feel pressured by the loss of their family income, and the company is pressured by lost production and sales. All over the world, popular movements aimed at creating democratic societies have sprung from labor movements which depend on the fundamental rights to organize, bargain, and strike. In the early 1980s, that right began to be strangled in the United States. Today's robber barons, like Frank Lorenzo, have begun to exploit a 50-year-old loophole in American labor law. They fire strikers by permanently replacing them. Often, they advertise for replacement workers well before the old contract has expired. Firing strikers is not done in other industrialized nations. It only happens in the United States and South Africa. Some company. Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. This is only one community among hundreds that have been torn in half by the firing of workers exercising their right to strike. For a long time, the Hammermill Paper Company was the area's biggest employer. In the 1980s, it was bought up by International Paper, a hugely profitable multinational company. Not long afterwards, 720 people were forced out on strike, then fired. Their families and their community paid a terrible price.
We really didn't want to go on strike. Actually, they gave us no choice. As far as I'm concerned, they put us on the street. Because we asked not for one thing. We only asked to keep what we had.
For years you did the best job you could, and then it's just like they throwed you away like some worn-out tool.
Emotionally, it more or less has totally destroyed his self-worth. And not only his self-worth, but about 720 other people.
Families have broken up. One man committed suicide, and it's really ripped the town right in half.
What I've seen happen is mental illness or emotional breakdown.
The kinds of effects that we saw were just right across the board. There were social effects, there were problems in the playground, problems in the classrooms. There were problems emotionally, kids not being able to sleep. There were somatic complaints with headaches, stomach aches, grades dropped. It really cut right across the board.
My uncle, my pop, and my dad got their jobs stole. I didn't like it very much.
You could feel the effect and the guarded relationships among people as they gathered for worship or for Christian education.
It's very hard to talk about it because it destroyed my family. My sister also, her husband worked at the mill. They've divorced, and a lot of it's due to the fact that the economic pressures of never regaining your employment. Her husband started to drink heavily. Myself, during the strike, at times I just felt useless, and my attitude towards life really changed, and it had a lot to do with the divorce.
Well, my experience is that once you have replacement workers hired, it's very difficult. You take a situation that's already very intractable and very contentious, and you make it far worse. You make it almost impossible to settle the grievance.
The firing of workers who strike has spread to many hundreds of companies throughout America. It's not just the big employers like Eastern Airlines or International Paper. A recent congressional report found companies firing strikers in fully 15% of all strikes, roughly 100 times every year. In Tennessee, a successful organizing drive was turned upside down by a company that refused to bargain a fair first contract. After the workers were forced out on strike, their jobs were taken away.
You could be standing at your press working and your nose would just start bleeding. It was caused from the dust and the chemicals and the heat, a lot of it. Mm-hmm. But we never had it checked out because we didn't have insurance to cover that.
Any job-related health problem, they would try to say, well, you have to go to so many doctors and you have to have so many allergy tests or whatever to prove to us, that this and this is going to have to come out of your pocket.
That was the best freedom that I ever felt in my life, was getting to walk out those doors like we were really going to accomplish something and doing something and looking out for each other.
And I think it was a good feeling for the majority of the people because it was about 97% of the people walked out with us.
But in a few days after we walked out, we knew that we were going to be replaced. And then we started to worry.
See, I had to get a job as a waitress now, which waitresses don't make any money at all. I mean, you could take from $6 down to $2.53 an hour. That hurts.
No job, no income. It's got a big impact on the family.
The hiring of the replacement workers has really been hard on Josh because he knows his grandmother doesn't have a job anymore. And the money's not coming in like it should be. We cut back on food and clothes and be saving with our lights and our telephone.
I don't think it's fair because she lost her job. And they gave it to somebody else.
Americans realize it's not right to fire workers for striking. When union members can be fired for protecting their benefits, everyone's health care, pensions, and salaries are threatened.
And when union employers cut back on the health care benefits, that directly affects other people who do not have unions. They want to cut back too. And it really erodes the way that we live, our standard of living.
It puts everybody at risk.
I could be next, you can be next. If they can cut back on union members, they can cut back on anybody.
Even people like me, being a nurse, should be afraid of what the employer could do to us by taking away our health care.
Cut the workers all the time, here and there and here and there, and not even give us a say, hey, you don't like it, you're on the street. And that out there is just not right.
How can it possibly be fair to fire a worker because he's trying to protect his family?
I really do feel it's un-American to have these rights taken away.
There ought to be a law protecting people and protecting workers from losing their jobs because an employer won't negotiate a contract.
Many in Congress share this concern. A bill to outlaw the permanent replacement of legal strikers has been introduced by Senator Howard Metzenbaum and Representative William Clay.
The right to strike, the workers' main protection in the collective bargaining arena, has been gutted, and it's time for Congress to act.
A fair and balanced system of collective bargaining, which is the promise of our labor law, should not fall victim to the misplaced values of some who wish to reduce the standard of living of our workforce to that of third world developing nations.
You can have a major impact on the fate of this bill by letting your senators and representatives know how you feel. Write them.
If we can get this law changed, then America will be what it's supposed to be.
There should be a right to fight for a better workplace.
If we don't have this right, we're not really living in America.
This is America, and you're supposed to be able to stand up for your rights.
How else are workers going to protect their families?
They really did a job on me. They snuck up behind me, threw me out of work, took my health care away. I thought that in the USA we had a constitution. I never knew they could do me this way.
I always thought America was built on justice. We all stood free before the law. If everybody knows it's wrong to steal your money, why isn't it a crime to steal your job?
But we've got a right, we've got a right, we've got a right to our jobs. You know it's right, we've got a right, we've got a right to our jobs. We've got a right, we've got a right, we've got a right to our jobs. There ought to be a law that they can't take your job away. There ought to be a law that they can't take your job away. There ought to be a law that they can't take your job away.
Americans deeply cherish the rights, liberties, and values that are the foundation of our free society and that enable working people to build a better life for themselves and their families. They recognize that these freedoms, including the right to collective action and the right to strike, are essential to maintaining America's high standard of living, which is based on the gains workers have secured through generations of struggle. That's why recent public opinion polls have shown the American people oppose the firing of strikers by a 2-to-1 margin. And that's why the labor movement is calling on Congress to close the loophole in the law that permits employers to fire workers by permanently replacing them when they choose to exercise their legal right to strike. For years, America's system of worker rights and collective bargaining has served as an inspiration to workers living in totalitarian nations of the left and right, where striking exposes them to grave personal risks. As a wave of democracy sweeps the planet, we have seen its values come under threat in our own country. It's in everyone's interest that we preserve and enhance those values. And we will not rest until Congress acts in the name of justice and fair play to ensure that America's workers cannot lose their jobs for defending themselves and their families.